And so it's official, we're going out cruising again in 3 days. Come on. Hello there and welcome to Travels with Geordie. My name is Peter and this good looking fellow here is Geordie, and we live together on a classic wooden motor cruiser in Victoria, British Columbia, all the while fixing it up for some pretty extensive cruising. If that's the sort of thing you might be interested in, why don't you consider sticking around and subscribing? We'd love to have you. Yes, puppy boy. Well, hey there, if you'd like your very own Travels with Geordie t-shirt, just stick around to the end of the episode and we'll show you how you can win one. Yes, it's true, we're going out cruising again. So excited. This coming Friday we'll head out of Victoria and up through the Gulf Islands to Vancouver for the Vancouver Wooden Boat Festival on Granville Island. It's a ball. We've been before. It's going to be great fun. And then we'll have another week after that to go cruising further north. Won't get the Desolation, but perhaps up to the Sunshine Coast Music Festival in Powell River, which is always a blast. Okay, so in preparation for cruising, there's always a few things we need to do. And this pile of boxes here is some new toys. Mostly, in fact, these boxes are entirely with regard to charging. The engine that we put in last year, I threw on a AC Delco generic alternator that goes on everything. Very, very simple, very cheap. I had one lying around, a 120 amp version. Well, that sounds great. 120 amps, let's make lots of amps. Except you can't put 120 amps burst of power through a single fan belt. I don't know why I didn't know that, but you just can't. So the fan belt squeaks. So the problem is I can't charge the big battery set at 120 amps without the belt burning out, which I do not want to have happen at sea. So I actually had to disconnect the charging system on our last cruise, and we were only able to charge off the generator. Ugh, hard to admit. But anyway, so in one of these boxes, probably this one, is a new Delco SI, same old thing, but a 65 amp, which is a generic size, really simple. It'll run fine off a single belt, and that'll run just about forever. Now, for those of you who are disappointed with me for putting such a generic non-marine alternator on a boat, well, yeah, it's true. I'd like to have one of those super nice Balco, Ballor, whatever they are, $1,900 alternators, really nice, maybe someday. But in the meantime, it's not a gasoline engine. There's nothing down there that's going to explode. It's a compromise you just have to make. The other thing is charging the Dinghy. Okay, the Dinghy was great. You see the Dinghy has an electric motor now. Well, that's fine, except you got to charge up that nice big AGM battery in it. Well, that should be pretty straightforward. Fine if you're underway and charging and you have about 14 volts, or off the generator and you have about 14 volts. But off the big battery bank in the boat, it's sitting at 12.5 volts. It's not enough oomph to drive amps into another battery. You can't really charge a battery off another big battery bank. You need to up the voltage to get the current to flow. So what you need is a DC to DC charger. And that's not a common thing. You'd think so. It would be pretty common, but they're not that common. So I think that's what's in this package. Let's have a look-see. No, good stuff though. The nice big connectors that we'll use to connect the charging cable from the boat. The plugs came in the other day to the Dinghy, and these are actually quite nice. I'm quite pleased with them. So basically they're just a massive charging plug. That'll be on the Dinghy and connect up to the battery. The other one will be on the back of the boat in Zephyrus, and I'm going to make up a cable with one of these at each end so that we can always charge the boat easily off, charge the Dinghy off the big boat. Now, we still haven't dealt with the raising the voltage, which is what I assume this box is going to deal with. Let's have a look see. Yes sirree, this little puppy, I'll show it to you in detail, is a DC to DC charge controller. So what it does is it basically raises the voltage from the 12 volt input to about 13.8, 14, something like that. I forget what the specs are exactly on the output. The downside is it's only 2 amps. So it's not really a very fast charge, but so this should solve the problem. I would love one of these that was 8 or 10 amps. It would fast charge the battery a bit. And the 2 amps is, this wire is seriously overkill at 8 gauge for 2 amps. But thinking ahead, who knows what the final solution will be. This was reasonably cheap. So let's look at the simple little alternator. Now I hate to admit it, I used to always buy alternators and such from, you know, the local auto parts store. Oh my gosh! AC Delco, it's the real thing. Damn you, Amazon! I mean, damn you! It's just too darn easy to pick up a brand new, manufactured, but factory remanufactured from AC Delco 10SI alternator for the paltry sum of $65 Canadian delivered. So, yeah, that's embarrassing, but I think it's the way we're going, and there's not much I'm going to be able to do about it. So this little puppy here is the most generic alternator ever made. Again, if you're familiar with cars, hot rods, playing with anything, tractors, basically you spin that and boom, you're making 65 amps at 14 and change volts all day long, and if it goes bad, keep another one around for $65. Okay, gotta install some of this stuff. So a lot of you are screaming, well, why don't you just use a battery charger? Well, it's true, the boat has a big inverter and could easily run a regular cheapo car battery charger. In fact, that's what we do here at the marina. It just seems wrong to go cruising, use the big battery bank to make 110 volts through the inverter, and then use a battery charger to turn it back into 12 volts to charge up the battery. Yeah, it would probably solve the problem, and yeah, we're using all kinds of other 110 volt appliances on the boat. It's just tidier somehow. Why can't you be 10 amps though? Okay, first up, I am thrilled with the little cheapo electric motor for the dinghy. That's working out great. What isn't working out so great is the battery location and the wires to the battery, which basically hang across where I have to put my feet. So I'd love to do something better with the battery, and I want to reroute the wires a lot tidier with some plugs, and I have solutions for all of that. Okay, now the first step is the wiring in the dinghy, and that will include connecting up these receptacles so that you can, if we get the right gender in there, okay, if you can quickly plug the motor into the battery and or unplug the motor and plug in the charge wire coming from the boat and from the boat charge controller, which is this puppy here, which I think I told you about. Now, spoiler alert, this may not be what we end up using, but in an effort to maintain a reasonable timeline, I'm going to pretend that that's what we're doing for now, because the whole dinghy side of it stays the same. This is not going to be really elegant. I'm basically going to put a couple of lugs on the end of these wires, attach them to the battery, and zip tie this to the handle. It would be lovely if it was all sort of in a box and tidy in a bracket somehow, but that will do for this cruise. It's way better than what we have. I'm going to put an extension on the wires coming from the motor and add the plug to the end of that, and boom, at least the motor and the battery can be quickly disconnected to remove the battery or the motor, whatever. And the other wire is going to be connected to another plug. Is going to be connected to some relatively heavy wire to come onto the boat and to the charge controller. Now when I say relatively heavy wire, this is 8 gauge. This is good for a gazillion amps. The charge controller is good for 2 amps. So this is definitely overkill. But I was trying to sort of think for the future, you know, no obsolescence, etc. And again, spoiler alert, that may not be the charger we use. So basically, I'm not quite sure which gauge of wire I'm going to use yet to run from the plug to the boat, but that's what waiting for the rest of the episode is all about. Let's get to putting some terminals on. Here I am cutting on Zephyrus's table, but anyway, I can't get this bloody thing cut. That's because I need to cut more forcefully, and I don't dare do it over the table. I need a cutting surface. Okay, now, this is a little more responsible. Okay, so now I can really dig into that and get that off of there. Excellent. So these are ready for some terminals. Remember this bad boy? I actually hate that expression, I apologize. But this is an amazing, amazing tool. Let's put it into place here. Okay. Hydraulic lug crimper. If you don't have one of these, and you have the most remote possibility of a use for it, get one, because they're just such an awesome toy. Okay, and it takes like next to no force to turn a couple of lugs into absolute, let's give it one more just for, there we go, open the valve, let go, and can you see that wicked crimp on there? That is fantastic. Okay, let's put some crimp tube on here. Did I say crimp tube? Shrink tube? Alright, there we go. Let's not melt that. Shrink tube is just amazing stuff, isn't it? I got to play with shrink tube at a remarkably young age. I was about 4. My father built research electronics for McGill University in Montreal, and I used to go into his lab, and he'd let me do some of the shrink tubing. It was kind of fun. The other really cool thing that he had was a solder sucker. Any of you that are involved in electronics would know what I mean. You get a little puddle of solder going, you got to get it off of there for some reason. There's this pneumatic plunger vacuum toy. Spring-loaded vacuum, sucks the solder right up. The fun part is that it sort of fills up with little chunks of solder. You can kick them back out later. Yeah, those were good years. Okay, let's attach this. Okay, here we go. That'll be just fine. And again, I would much prefer to do some kind of cabinet for this, something that could easily be removed, but in the meantime, this will definitely do. I know you're screaming, it should be a battery box, and well, maybe in time it'll be a battery box, because we don't want to be doing any of that. Okay, let's carry on with the wire. Now, this is the wire from the motor, which is pretty sketchy, nasty little old terminals on it. It'll come around the side. Okay, so for the wire for the motor, I'm going to put a bit of an extension on it, and I have some number 8 red and black, so that works out really well. What I don't have is butt connectors for this size, but it's not super crucial. I am going to do a, what they call a linesman's joint, basically twisted and soldered. Now this soldering iron hasn't been used for a couple of years. The last thing I used with it was to cut troughs in foam on the floor of my Airstream a long time ago. Some of you have been following along would have seen that. So when I pull the trigger now, I bet it is going to smoke, because that's completely packed up with, if it works at all. Oh yeah, let's put this outside. Burn that off. Okay, that's ridiculous. Okay, out with the soldering iron. Just not enough oomph. Now, one thing I should also say about these Weller soldering irons is if you're not getting hot, sometimes you have to retighten the little clamps on the tip, because it just gets a little soft in there. You don't get really good contact, so you don't get really good heat. But I can tell that that massive joint needs fire. Let's get on with it. Oh yeah. A really full joint. Okay, let that cool a bit. When the solder joint is that big, damn planes. Iced tea. Whoa, that's hot. Okay, let's see the other one. This is actually a really ugly joint, but it's secure. If you guys are using any other torch than the Bernzomatic, whatever this is, the TS something or other, I'll put a link down in the description. I've used so many old torches, and this is just absolutely fantastic. You can lock it off, won't go on. You can lock it on, so it won't go off. Just love it, love it, love it. Okay. Okay, well, I'm not going to say that even shrink tube makes these look any prettier, but they're secure and they'll last. So let's go do the same thing outside to the wires coming off the motor. Okay, so this is definitely not elegant, but it's functional, and that's all I'm really looking for. Let's try it out. Woohoo! Forward works, and reverse works. Excellent. I like it. Tired of tripping over the wire. Now, you got to do the charge side of the same deal. Okay, so if you didn't like that little mess of wiring, you're really not going to like this. This lovely black cable is called SJOW or SJOOW. Some people call it extension cord cable. I love this stuff. It's rubber. It's super flexible. It's super handy. I just love it. It comes in various gauges with 2, 3, sometimes 4 conductor. It's house wiring wire, not for house, but to make extension cords, or more likely tool cords and things like that. I used a lot of it in my Land Rover. I just love the stuff. It is not tinned wire, and it is not 8 gauge. It is 10, or actually I think it's only 12, but it's certainly going to cope with the 2 amps. This thing is going to pump out, or maybe a few more. But anyway, so this is what I'm going to use for the cord to run out to charge the dinghy. I'm going to put this on the end of it. I'm not going to put you through it, because you know what I'm going to do. I'm going to solder, I'm going to shrink tube, I'm going to make a mess. At the other end, at the boat end, we'll connect it up to this thing out in the cockpit, and we'll be able to charge the dinghy. Yeah. Okay, it's tomorrow. Disregard all the junk. I think I mentioned a spoiler about the battery charger, the DC to DC battery charger for the dinghy battery, which is an AGM. This thing is exactly the right sort of thing. It's a battery charger with 3 modes, like a trickle, you know, the 3 basic modes that batteries run. I forget what they are. They're bulk. I don't have my glasses on. But anyway, it can put some power into it to charge it up, and then once it's charged, it maintains that charge. It's got some battery charging smarts in it. I think I mentioned it's only 2 amps though. So we went and got this thing. Now, nice company, Victron Energy, really nice thing. This is a 12 volt to DC converter. In other words, you can put 12 volts in and you can dial out anything between 9 and 15 volts output. Well, that sounds great, because if you crank it up to 14 volts like that, it will charge. And this thing is good for 9 amps. Plus, it was cheaper than this. But anyway, the only problem is it's not actually a battery charger. It doesn't have the battery charger features where it's sort of smart and listening to the internal current and stuff like that. So I'm kind of worried if I wind this thing up to 14.5 volts and I turn it on and I walk away, it's just going to cook the poor thing once it gets charged. So I'm a little hesitant to use this, even though I like the 9 amps. So let's do a little math. We got to go outside. Okay, so the idea being, how much electricity is the little electric outboard using when we're going cruising, and therefore how long will it take to charge the battery back up? Okay, so here we go. This is a clamp-on ammeter. When I bought it, it was quite rare to be able to get one that also worked for DC. I love it. I bought it in an electronics shop years and years ago. I'm not going to put a link below. Find one. So basically, you got to be able to isolate one conductor though. So one wire. Right now we're drawing 0 current. So let's spark up the outboard. Not hit the propeller on the dock here. There we go. We're now going flat out. Let's keep the propeller in the water so that it doesn't cavitate and spin freely. Okay, we're now sucking pretty much 35 amps. Okay, well that's as fast as we can possibly go. Turn that off. Okay, so that's as fast as we can possibly go. So if we went for an hour, wide open, 35 amps, 35 amp hours. So if we were to charge the battery back up with a 2 amp charger, half of 35 is half of 34, 15, 16, 17 and a half hours. Well, that's sort of overnight. I mean, it's a long overnight. It's certainly, if you went for one 1 hour trip a day, 24 hours worth of charging would be significantly more, and it would be okay. So you're sort of limited to straight time charging and 1 hour wide open a day. And that sort of sounds practical for most cruising. So the 2 amp battery charger isn't the end of the world. Okay, so this is what I'm going to do. There's a whole schwack of you out there that are smarter than me. So because I've opened this package, going to install the little 2 amp charger that I kind of like the way it works. I am not going to open the DC to DC converter until I hear from you. So those of you who know what I should be doing, let me know in the comments below, and I can easily swap this puppy in. But if it's not a good idea, I can return it because I haven't opened it. So let's move on with that philosophy. So this is the Victron isolated DC-DC Orion TR12 12 to 9, which means it'll do 12 volts in, 12 volts out at 9 amps. It's quite a nice thing. It's got a little remote. You can put a little switch on it, turn it on and off at a distance. It's actually quite nice. But if it's going to cook my batteries, it's no good to anyone. So let me know if I should use this to charge the outboard battery. Okay, let's move on. We got stuff to do. Install this. The cable's made up. That's outside stuff. Okay, so out in the cockpit I have mounted the 2 amp charger against the inside of the hull. Underneath combing here should be pretty good. It's actually a waterproof thing. I have bought a couple of the corresponding El Cheapo polarized small connectors, so I don't actually cut this wire. Again, this is well, it's not ideal. There's some untinned wire here. Well, that's untinned. We're doing what we can here. So we're going to take a couple of butt connectors and close this all up. Okay, very nice, very nice. We'll get some P-clips on here and tidy this up. Let me make the cable for the other side. Okay, there we go. All right, well, it was tempting to sort of wrap this whole thing in, bloody hot, in some more shrink tube, but there's no real advantage because this is going to be all tucked up underneath the deck and some big P-clips holding this cable so that there's strain relief because there's no way this can deal with any sort of strain relief. Anyway, let's go install it all. Woohoo! Holy smoke, it's hot. Yowza. Okay, so I'm going to want that basically there. Alrighty. Not beautiful, but it'll do for now. Got to get side cutters, trim these, and let's test it. Disconnect the motor, connect the charger. All right, okay, let's see what we have for amps. It's actually putting 2.5 amps in. Ooh, that's pretty cool. I don't know if you can see that. Come on in there. Upside down, 2.5 amps. Well, that's not so bad. That drastically reduces our charge cycle down to about 12 hours overnight. I think this is going to be just fine. I like it. Good heavy duty cable. I like it. Let's have a look and see what the charger itself is saying. All right. So it's not dead, but it's charging. That's good. I don't know what these lights mean. These are all errors. Well, maybe that one will go on when it's fully charged. That one is if it was... Okay, anyway, I gotta read the manual. Anyways, charging away at 2.5 amps, which makes me very, very happy. This might end up having to be a more permanent installation, which means I might do it a little tidier. But anyway, let's move on. Hello and welcome to the Beer of the Week. Good to see you all back again. This week we're drinking from the 4 Mile Brew Pub, which is just down the street. Their Hazy Citra Pale Ale, which has fast become a favorite of mine. Now, you're going to say, Peter, you're drinking out of tinnies, a can. Yes, I am, because more and more beers, micro beers, here on the coast are only available in cans. And I've had to ask a few brewers about why that is, and I think I finally have the straight answer. It's a combination of things. First problem is glass is becoming less and less recyclable. In fact, here in British Columbia at least, you can't recycle glass anymore. It all goes into landfill. Not so good. The other is that most of the small craft breweries don't bottle or can themselves. They hire a contractor that comes around once a week, once every couple of days, I don't know what it is. And the canning is much simpler and faster for them to do that with a contractor rather than a bottling contractor. And you notice they all have these little shrink-on labels. So the can is quite generic, and they just hand the contractor a bunch of the labels. They whip them on pretty quick, easier to handle. I think cans are the future. I sort of hate to admit it, but some things just you gotta accept after a while, and I do really enjoy this beer. So, enough of that. Hazy. I don't know why I'm suddenly such a fan of these hazy IPAs. It all started, if you remember, in San Francisco when I was on the road trip with my daughter. Had the first one, and it was just brilliant. Oh God, that is just delicious. Perfect. Oh my gosh, perfect. Absolutely. I think it's probably my favorite beer. Not necessarily this one, but the hazy IPAs. There's something about them. Good. Splendid. As usual, time to thank my past patrons. Thank you all so very much for being there for me and coming aboard. I also want to thank the new round of people purchasing things through the Amazon Associates links I've been putting in. Someone suggested I do it, and I did it, and lo and behold, I've made $1.95 in the last 2 weeks. So thank you for buying products through those links. So I guess I'll stay on top of that. The other thing I want to thank is your patience for the advertising. I've turned the advertising back on for all but the most recent, always the latest video. For instance, this video will not be monetized for a while, so that regular viewers don't have to see ads. But it's made a staggering difference in views. Now, the whole myth about whether or not advertising aids views or not, I think has been put to bed. My views have almost doubled in the last week and a half since I started advertising again. In fact, when I enable an ad for a video, you can just see a jump, a jump in views in the analytics at that point. So I think it's absolutely a sure thing that advertising does that. Okay. More business. I talked about a free t-shirt. As you know, last week I started giving away t-shirts again, and the advertising will pay for that. If it pays for 2, I'll give away 2 shirts, I think. Anyway, so far it pays for 1. I'm going to make it just a little bit harder. You got to wait till the end of the episode, because I'm going to give you a secret word, and the secret word this week is oak. Oak, the wood. This is mahogany, but oak, O-A-K. All you got to do is leave a comment down below with the word oak, and you're in the running for a free t-shirt, and I pick at random from the first 24 hours worth of comments to give away that shirt. Cheers, see you next week. Oh, God, that is so good.